Hey folks, Larson here doing a video game related video for the first time in about 5 years. I'm not reviewing video games per se. I'm coming here today to talk about a trend pertaining to the discussion of one particular franchise. A trend that I find a bit irritating. It's the really sudden, forced meme, or whatever you want to call it, where people are trying really hard to make the Legend of Zelda franchise into a homoerotic farce, to read non-existent gay and trans themes into the games, and to headcanon Link as a gay, queer, trans icon, or whatever. This has suddenly exploded in popularity over the last year or so, and I disagree just a bit. I'm old enough to remember when the jokes people made about the franchise were that it was white supremacist propaganda about a handsome Aryan boy saving a beautiful Aryan princess by killing a swarthy beast man. Of course, I don't think anybody actually thought that. Those were just jokes. But this crap is apparently serious, article after article after article about it, and I think this ought to be analyzed. Let's break it down into 4 sections. Why I'm making the video, the alleged evidence for the franchise being full of queer themes, the verifiable evidence of the franchise not having the homo sex in it, and what I mean by the title, Porn-Induced Sexual Dysphoria. So you might be asking yourself, Larson, why do you care? Why can't you just let people enjoy the games the way they want? Indeed, I can see your point. The small L libertarian in me is very sympathetic with the view that one can just do as you wilt if it doesn't bother other people. The problem is that the mentally ill castration fetishists have popularized the articles about trans sissy femboy horseshit to the extent that it's beginning to seep into the mainstream. In other words, it is starting to bother other people. If one were to say, I am a Legend of Zelda fan in a public forum, up until very recently, this was a pretty bog standard opinion to have about video games. Of course, not everybody's a fan. If you're not, that's fine. But it was seen as a solid mainstream game franchise with innovative game mechanics and a fascinating mythos interspersed throughout the games. Enough for geeks to make hours-long rambling videos about said mythology and its subtext and themes. But now, to say I'm a Legend of Zelda fan, people look at you like you have turds hanging out of your mouth. It's like, oh, you're some weird Baka sex change enthusiast who's into emasculation porn. Please stay away from my children, sir. Again, you might be asking, why do I care? So what if the game franchise becomes a homoerotic farce of cross-dressing gay boys getting bent over tables? How does that affect you personally? Okay, let's talk about why it affects me personally. I've alluded to this in various works of mine, but, I didn't have a very happy childhood. Without getting into detail about why exactly it sucked, I spent the majority of my youth miserable, paranoid, afraid, and self-loathing. What kept me going through most of it? Escapism. Escape and retreat into works of fantasy and mythology. Lots of different narratives in various types of media. Books and movies, comics and video games. I consumed lots of it. I loved Tolkien's Legendarium. I loved superhero comics. I'm sure it's just a complete coincidence that those same frotteurs and autogynophiliacs and smug irony lovers are also trying to read gay themes into those. But The Legend of Zelda will always hold a special place in my heart. Link's Awakening on the old monochromatic Game Boy was one of the first games I ever played, probably not the first, but one of the first. I got it when I was 4, I only beat it when I was 11, playing on and off over those years. But even in my first fumbling infantile attempts at it, I loved it. I loved the sense of adventure and exploration. I loved how the instruction manual and the little maps in the game gave slight hints of deeper, spider-haunted mystery that I couldn't attain due to a kindergarten-age skill issue, but nonetheless stimulated in my mind. As I grew older and played more of the games in the franchise, I loved how the games got a little darker and more intellectually stimulating with its growing audience, developing its mythology and, in my opinion, becoming a pop culture mythos that is on par with those of H.P. Lovecraft, Robert Howard, or J.R.R. Tolkien. And to be quite honest, I feel like I never would have gotten into more intellectual and adult fantasy works if it wasn't for those fumbling, grasping starts. I legitimately do think that this franchise has an astounding amount of power and depth that could be explored. I see parallels to many works of Western fantasy, Tolkien and Burroughs and Barrie predominantly, with bits of Lovecraft, Howard, and, when you look at the franchise as an interconnected unit, Michael Moorcock's Saga of the Eternal Champion comes to mind. And to see this powerful mythology reduced to a shrieking gay pride parade robs it of every scrap of meaning it has, and yeah, it enrages me. So with all that being said, and seeing how this franchise's mythology was a balm to me in my darkest hours, maybe you can understand why I get a little angry when I see people turning it into some farcical gay porn parade. Don't you think it's doing a bit of a disservice to thousands of young boys by perverting this heroic Brandywine mythology in such a way? I mean, it's not even like you're depicting heroism and valor that happens to be done by a homosexual man. You're stripping it of all strength, masculinity, and thumos, and turning it into sissified horseshit as a deliberate slap to the face. I think it would be great to see an original work of heroic fantasy that happens to star a gay man, but I'm not entirely sure you people would be capable of depicting this. That you would be capable of depicting a chivalric romance of strength and heroism and courage that just happens to star a dude who likes dicking down other men. But I only say that because I've literally never seen such a thing, and I know for a fact you people wouldn't be remotely capable of doing such a thing. You people are the same slapdicks who say, Zelda would be better without the combat. Because who could possibly expect something as primeval and base as combat in a game where you play as a knight ordained by the gods to fight for truth and justice? I always said that my line in the sand was if the powers that be started to figuratively or literally gay up either Zelda or Conan the Barbarian. And Amazon tried to gay up the latter, but it was thankfully cancelled. The powers that be are coming for the former now, and I'm putting my foot down. You can call it gatekeeping if you want, but by God, I'm keeping this gate. In this particular case, if you give these people an inch, I know they'll take a mile. As illustrated by the 6 months of the year they get dedicated to them, and perhaps some gates needed to be kept all along. Okay, so now that you know why I'm doing this, I like to think that I'm a fair man, and I will try to understand why exactly people have concluded that the Legend of Zelda franchise is some screeching rainbow parade. Bear in mind, I've not played every game in the franchise, but I have played many. Maybe the games I haven't played are full of top surgery and butt sex. I can't say for sure. Anyway, the first bit of evidence I've found, the one that gets repeatedly cited, and probably the only thing that could remotely be considered concrete evidence is the fact that in Breath of the Wild, there's a brief moment in the game where you have to cross-dress to sneak into a place. More specifically, it is the Gerudo City, the Gerudo being the fantasy trope of warrior women who hate men. You have to dress as a lady to sneak into their place, and then you're done with it. The game then gives you the option of continuing to wear women's clothing, or you can change clothes. That's it. There is no indication that Link enjoys wearing women's clothing. There's no indication that he masturbates while wearing his mother's underwear. There's no indication that he identifies as a woman or anything like that. He had to dress up as a woman briefly as part of his overall mission. That's it. Well, why else would he dress in drag if he didn't like it, you might be asking? I don't know, because it's funny? Because seeing men forced into drag against their will is comical, which is why other similar fantasy games like Final Fantasy have done this exact same scenario. In Greek mythology, Heracles has to dress in drag. Is he trans? Another question might come up. Why does the game give you the option to keep the women's clothing on? Because it's a fucking video game. The game gives you the option to wear all sorts of different clothes and armor and gear and stuff because it's fun to have options for customization. Do I really need to explain this? Yes, if you want to wear lady clothes, you can. You can also run about in your underwear in the game. Does that make him a nudist? You can wear whatever the hell this is. Does that make him some kind of weird fish fetishist? Don't answer that. It's a video game. You have different armor and clothing. The second argument that I've seen is something along the lines of Link wears a skirt. Wrong. Wrong. It's not a skirt. It's a tunic. Bit of a history lesson for you, Slick. This is a tunic. It's a long shirt belted in the middle, worn over trousers. Variations of this basic idea were what your average Chungus European peasant would have been wearing for millennia, from the Neolithic age until basically the 1600s. Please step away from the sissy porn for 5 seconds and learn some history, please. The final argument is the most ignorant of all, and that it's usually some variation of, he look gay, therefore he gay. This is an argument shared by the trans community as well as your average beer-bellied boomer who's angry at his son interrupting the football game to play his faggot video shit. I mean, does he look particularly gay? I don't really think so. Is he the stereotypically masculine hairless gorilla with a beard? No. I mean, does he look like anything other than a young man, an Apollonian beardless youth, so to say? If I want it to be ridiculously pretentious. I'm a high school teacher. He looks like your average adolescent youth to me. I'm fairly sure that in no game is he ever older than like 20. Wow, a young man looks like a young man. What exactly is it you're saying here? That any man that doesn't look like Charles Bronson has to be gay? I think that's incredibly ignorant, Not to mention that it's incredibly hypocritical coming from your mouths. You all say gender is a spectrum, gender identity is a spectrum. And then you claim that any man that doesn't fit into a very narrow definition of masculinity has to be gay. And you do the same thing with women too. Any man that isn't a 6'8", 400-pound power lifter with a 3-foot long beard, he has to be gay or trans femme. Any woman that doesn't wear dresses and makeup and stiletto heels 24/7 has to be a lesbian or non-binary or is a boy on the inside.
Look at them sideburns! He looks like a girl! Now, Johnny Unitas, there's a haircut you could set your watch to!
Congratulations, trans community. You've become so progressive and woke that you looped right around and you found common ground with reactionaries. Both of you insist on the most rigid, archaic definitions of gender roles, and any man who has long hair and isn't a hairy fat belly must be gay. Bravo. Those are the three main arguments I've seen. If you can show me another argument, please show me. Here, I'll throw in another argument I've seen. The console is called the Switch. Hurdy-dur, that means trans. Yeah, because that means anything. I mean, this is like saying Transformers has to be a trans metaphor because Optimus Prime turns into a truck. Idiots! I mean, to go back to other pop culture mythos that get painted with the rainbow brush, I think you can make a much stronger case that, like, Batman is gay. I mean, canonically, Bruce Wayne sleeps in a bed with and takes showers with a teenage boy. Link never does that. But I digress. Okay, so now that we've discussed the scant evidence, and that's being highly generous, of the alleged LGBT themes that are prevalent in the franchise, let's discuss the abundant evidence of heterosexuality. We will only discuss things that are canon, which is to say things that are found in the games or official supplementary material made by Nintendo themselves. So as tempting as it is, the cartoon's depiction of Link as essentially a fantasy version of one of the Fenstruck brothers will not be considered here. Also, spoiler warnings. Okay, first of all, we can go all the way back to Zelda 2 in 1988. Ignoring the prostitutes in red dresses you can visit in the villages, Link and Zelda kiss at the end of the game. I know technically you don't see it. It was an 80s video game. The graphics were limited. I just hope our hero didn't get the clap from the hookers. No, come on, you were thinking it too. A woman in a red dress pulls you into her house. Anyway, Link's Awakening, 1993. Widely considered to be the first game in the series that had a real plot beyond Save Princess Derp, deeper characterization, and surrealist existentialist themes. It's also the first game that has hints of romance beyond some last-minute thing, and wouldn't you know it, it's completely heterosexual. You got Marin, is this your big chance? Big chance for what? The big chance to get mimosas at brunch and giggle over shirtless pictures of Timothée Chalamet? No, a chance at getting some. And then there's the very clear romantic moment they share at the beach. Again, do gay dudes watch the sunset on the beach with island broads often? Ocarina of Time, 1998. The game was explicitly intended to have dating sim elements in the pre-alpha testing stages. This was removed due to hardware limitations. Elements of this still remain in the game, such as the fact that the majority of the important plot-driving characters are women. Not only are they women, the game makes it pretty clear that most of them want that dick. To be fair, the affection is not exactly reciprocated, but I would argue that's because the main character was forcibly aged up from 10 to 17 essentially overnight. He's still mentally a child, and he's not prepared for this. And by the way, this game and its sequel are essentially about a child soldier being forced into combat and the mental trauma he suffers therein, and his efforts to overcome that trauma. Where exactly does flamboyant homosex fit into that? And speaking of the sequel, Majora's Mask, 2000. Here is a slightly older Link, I always presume 12 or 13 or so, considering that he's clearly bigger and stronger than he was in the previous game, getting his face shoved into an older woman's tits, and he feels all warm and fuzzy inside. Oracle of Seasons, 2001. Link sees a hot, exotic, swarthy chick getting her groove on, and he's mesmerized by it. Wind Waker, 2003. Link and Zelda are explicitly told that the world of the surface is their land, i.e., they will essentially be the founding father and mother of a new nation. Twilight Princess, 2007. A major supporting character in the game is the Link from Ocarina of Time. As a ghost, he is pretty explicitly said to be your great-great-great, etc., grandfather. He refers to you as my child, refers to our blood, and so forth. In other words, the hero of time came back from his adventures, found a nice girl to settle down with, and got to knocking boots, and he had at least one child. Who that girl was is not stated, but it was obviously somebody. For the guy that you play as in this game, in addition to all the female attention he gets, he is quite clearly smitten with Midna in her true form, and he's quite clearly distraught at her leaving him in the end. Skyward Sword 2010. Link and Zelda share a leitmotif that is referred to as the love theme on the soundtrack. And again, it's pretty heavily hinted that they will hook up and their descendants will be the founders of the royal family hundreds of years in the future. Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. I have not actually played these, but what little I do know will serve as evidence. First of all, in Breath of the Wild, our two leads share multiple emotional moments. While you never see them doing anything explicitly sexual, a clear emotional bond is shared in the game. Also, check out Link blatantly looking at her ass right here. Tears of the Kingdom has your house, now being referred to as Zelda's house. The house only has one bed, and Zelda took all your weapons and gear off the wall and replaced it with pictures of horses and other girly shit. That is the most blatant girlfriend behavior I have ever seen, outside of just having a scene where she gives him a blowjob. Like, how much more evidence do you need of our boy being a staunch heterosexual? Do you need to see him fucking somebody? I mean, I don't think Nintendo's putting that in the game. Okay, so now that we've established the franchise having a clear record of heterosexuality, let's analyze you freaks. The games do not support your trans fantasies. You've just been subjected to a constant bombardment of pornography and other sexualized media from the time you were a child, and it warped your brain. Seeing an endless cavalcade of tarted up cam horses made you think that the only real women are ones with silicone injected every which way and wearing makeup 24/7. And ditto for an endless parade of steroided up, beard wearing fitness and masculinity influencing hacks. You've looked at and beaten off to so much porn, regular heterosexual pornography cannot get you turned on anymore. And you have to look at emasculation, sissification, trans NB porn just to get to normal. Your hormone levels are all out of whack due to constant masturbation, a lack of exercise, poor sleeping patterns, and bad diet. You've been constantly bombarded with the message, so you decided to identify as the opposite gender, even though you're probably not part of the less than 1% of the population that is actually intersex. Your understanding of the human condition is so bastardized by modern society that you think any display of friendship or fraternal bonding between men automatically means they're hammering each other in the ass. This applies to both Zelda and Lord of the Rings. You're seeing phantoms where they don't exist. 90% of the people writing these articles are very sad people with no personality, talent, or skills, who desperately need a popular thing to validate their existence so they don't paint the walls with dad's 12 gauge. And the only way that something can validate them is if it's exactly like them, because nobody has any goddamn imagination or aspirations for a higher calling beyond grotesque sexual gratification. And that's just sad. If you're in that boat, I feel for you. I sympathize with you. And I have nothing against you being gay or trans or queer or NB or whatever. But you just can't take a heroic mythology that has existed for almost 40 years and run it into the ground. It's not even like most gay people say this from what I've seen. It's just the extremely online Morlock weirdos who do this. The Zelda franchise does not need you literally or figuratively masturbating all over it. If you want to play the games and enjoy them as they are, that's wonderful. You have every right to do so. But please leave your porn-addled delusions out of it. I reiterate the title. Please keep your porn-induced sexual dysfunction out of the Legend of Zelda franchise. Instead, might I suggest going out in the fresh air and sunshine, eat some healthy food, stop masturbating for a month or two, and then get back to me. It'll probably clear up a lot of problems in your mind. Thank you. I'm Larson Halleck, and thank you for listening.
And now, a word from our sponsors. Hello, are you a fan of Larson Halleck and the Barbaric Gentleman? Of course you are, otherwise you wouldn't be watching. Would you like to help the channel grow? Here's how you can. You can go to patreon.com and pledge some money, joining the ranks of the illustrious heroes you'll find at the end of the video. You can also go to paypal.me/LarsonHalleck to give me some money, or you can follow me on social media, at Larson Halleck on Twitter and Instagram. I don't use right-wing grifter sites like Gab and Parler because they suck. You can also buy my books. The links to do so are in the video description. And of course, please subscribe and spread the word. That name again is Larson Halleck, and I hope you enjoyed the video.